Welcome to the ListenUp podcast, where we explore hearing loss, communication, connections, and health.
Hi, everybody. Dr. Mark Syms here. I'm the host of the ListenUp podcast, where I feature top leaders in healthcare. This episode is brought to you by ListenUp Hearing Center. I help patients to effectively treat their hearing loss so that they can remain independent and so they can also remain better socially connected with friends and family. This session, the reason I'm so passionate about hearing loss is because I lost my brother Robbie twice, first to his hearing loss and then to his brain tumor. I am an E who cares for ears only. I'm the E of ENT. I've performed over 10,000 surgeries and taken care of many more patients with hearing loss. I'm really excited to have our guest today. That's Dr. Jeremy Weiss. He is from Rise 25. He has interviewed thousands of healthcare leaders in healthcare, and we're going to flip the script today because he's going to interview me. Jeremy, welcome to the podcast.
Dr. Syms, I'm excited, and this is a special episode because we are going to do a year in review, some of the top guests, some of the top lessons, and I would love to hear your kind of advice and stories overlaid with these interviews. And so if you're watching the video, you will be able to see the actual guests and pages. We're at azhere.com and on the blog, but you can check out all the podcasts on the Listen Up podcast. And the first one is Dr. Douglas Beck, exploring the science behind hearing and listening. And, you know, you have some really prominent people in healthcare on. This person is a well-known figure in audiology, the vice president of academic sciences for Oticon, which is a company that manufactures adaptive hearing solutions. Some of the things that stuck out in this one, Dr. Syms, you talked about kind of the night and day difference between hearing and listening. You talked about some of the underexplored factors for dementia and hearing loss, and even breaking down the hearing aid's role in comprehension.
Yeah, he's a great guest. Doug, or Dr. Beck, he travels all over the United States lecturing people about this issue. I do want to give a shout out to him. He just sent me an email the other day saying he was retiring, so I want to congratulate him. But the key and the thing that's great about this episode, he's an excellent teacher. So you will learn wonderful things from his episode covering those topics. It's a great episode. I encourage everybody to watch it.
The next one, Dr. Syms, is Dr. Devin Cunning, the future of otolaryngology. And he's a physician and surgeon at Arizona Coast Ear, Nose, and Throat. He's served at the facility since 1999. And some of the things that stuck out was, you know, what motivates him every day and the stories that drive him, the mentors who encouraged him, and what the future holds.
Yeah, Devin's a great colleague. This is a really fun episode. And what you really can get a great taste for is how passionate he is about patient care, how much he really cares for his patients. And I know he knows their stories. He talks to them. He's a great colleague. And it's a really fun interview. Again, I'd encourage people to take a look. It's a great interview.
The next one is Dr. Nina Krause, the biology behind hearing, and the scientist, audiologist, professor of neurobiology and otolaryngology at Northwestern University, which is in my backyard. And actually, some of the things that stuck out in this one, exploring the intersection between biology and hearing, also why hearing is a unique sense and how we use it, and some of the biological factors that affect hearing and comprehension. You know, talk about this one. And I know there's a lot of, you know, a repeating theme is the comprehension piece.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I would say about Dr. Krause, she's a great scientist. And so for me, the reason this was such a wonderful episode was she taught me so much. So if you want to learn about what's going on in the research of, understanding and hearing loss, this is a great episode. And she really has, been in the field for quite some time. She is really a giant in the field in terms of the research. And it's a great episode.
The next one, Dr. Derek Hewitt, the world of otolaryngology and ENT, is a board certified at Prescott ENT in Arizona, specializes in a lot of different things, but specifically including head and neck surgery, pediatric care, and hearing loss. And a couple of things that stuck out with this one is the journey from English degree to ENT. That's probably not a common path for people. They're majoring something science related, the powerful technology of the new Inspire devices, and some of the significance of sounds.
Yeah, Dr. Hewitt taught me some great stuff. it was really inspiring to hear how he, was drawn to medicine and to take care of patients. And he talks about this new device called the Inspire, which has really gotten a lot of traction in the sleep apnea world. So he is a wonderful colleague, works up north of here, takes great care of patients in Prescott, and it's a really fun interview. I encourage people to watch it.
The next one, Dr. Brianna Allman, the need for cognitive disease testing, neuropsychologist specialized in Alzheimer's, Parkinson's patients, and dementia. She must have a lot of patients. I mean, this is a tough field. I mean, you have to be, probably so many emotional things that dealing with these type of patients with them and their families. So she must be a remarkable individual. And some of the things that stuck out with this one is the utility of different tests for cognitive health. She talks about identifying cognitive issues in loved ones, because I'm sure if you catch it earlier, it's better. And which test questions are most predictive of future diseases.
Yeah, she's a colleague who we have a lot of patients in common. And so she does great testing. And we've really collaborated a lot in terms of the discussions of the impact of hearing loss and evaluating these patients. It's a great interview, and she's a really great colleague to work with. I had a great fun time talking to her, and it just reminded me how important her role is in the field of helping people with cognitive issues.
Does it help to catch these things early, or?
The evidence suggests strongly yes. There's another interview that's yet to be published with Dr. Reed. He's from Johns Hopkins, and they're doing a big study. The results aren't in yet, but he did update me to tell me that the results from the big study, that it should be finished at the end of the year. So we should start seeing results the beginning of 2023, the beginning of next year. So that's actually a yet to be published episode by Dr. Reed, if you want to learn about that particular study.
Nice. The next one is Dr. Sabah, the cutting edge research on Alzheimer's, is board certified geriatric neurologist at the Cleveland Clinic. And, a couple things that stuck out. He also authored a book, The Alzheimer's Answer. And a couple things with this interview is he describes how he became an expert at Alzheimer's. What should you do if you suspect a loved one has dementia? And some of the research on blood tests for identifying dementia, and even the intersection between hearing loss and Alzheimer's.
Yeah. So I just want to congratulate him. He actually, at the time, was in Las Vegas at the Cleveland Clinic. He's moved down to the Barrow Neurologic Institute, where I practice. So he is now a local colleague. And it was a great discussion about Alzheimer's. He was very generous, talking about, biological markers and all of the stuff that's coming out. And he is a cutting edge expert on Alzheimer's. And it was a really great episode. If people want to see what people are doing in the research in terms of what's happening today, this is the episode you'd like to watch.
We talked about the intersection between hearing loss and Alzheimer's. What do you see as?
Well, certainly if you can't perceive your world correctly because of hearing loss, you're not going to stay connected to that world. So it's pretty clear that, social isolation and being able to process things and understand your environment and interact with people is really important to maintaining normal cognition. And so the intersection is becoming clearer and clearer. And so I now tell people, as much as we treat high blood pressure to prevent heart attacks, people should treat their hearing loss to prevent dementia. And so I think it's of the same nature. And I think the evidence is emerging to make that a very clear association.
Nice. The next one, Dr. Ryan McCreary, finding new methods to measure hearing loss. And he's the director of research at Boys Town National Research Hospital. A couple things with this one is researching different methods of hearing intervention outside of hearing aids, the relationship between children, the executive function and hearing, and some of the new research what the new research is saying about mild hearing loss.
Yeah, so he is the director of Boys Town, which is a very famous research hospital. The thing that I love talking to him is his passion for this subject area of research oozes throughout. He just loves what he does, and I really admire his passion. And that last thing you touched on in terms of mild hearing loss, and the discussion really has kind of changed how I talk to patients when I look at their hearing test, and why some patients, even though they are at the bottom part of normal, might still be having problems. And it actually is, this episode changed how I practice. So it was a really great episode for me because I learned a lot.
The next one, Dr. Syms, is Dr. Rodney Perkins, innovating in the medical space and founder of the Perkins Clinic. And also professor emeritus of surgery at the Stanford University School of Medicine. And a couple things with this one that stuck out is his medical journey, how he became an ENT doctor. He talks about his favorite invention and how the idea for Erlands came about, and also just the effects of hearing loss on patients.
Yeah, Dr. Perkins is an amazing guy. He's a serial innovator in the ear, nose, and throat space. And so the current thing he's working on is, and it's out, is the ear lens. We do it. It's a great invention. And essentially, it is his idea coming to life. And the other thing that's really great about this episode is he talks about innovation, how it occurs, and how he sets aside time for thinking and how to come up with ideas and innovate. And it's a really great insight into how somebody who does multiple things in a field comes up with great ideas that eventually turn into products that help patients.
Just briefly describe, what is the ear lens?
So a typical hearing aid is a speaker in your ear canal. The ear lens is a little motor that drives your first bone of hearing. So rather than sending sound down the ear canal and getting caught by the eardrum, this directly drives your ear bones. And so you can get better performance. So it's a higher performing hearing aid. It's a pretty amazing device.
Nice. The next one is Dr. Tamara Lieberman, practicing internal medicine, and she's an internal medicine specialist and physician at the Internal Medicine of Arizona. And a couple things that stuck out with this one is, she talked about her medical journey, but one of her most profound patient moments. And she also talks about her mother's hearing challenges and her experience treating patients with hearing loss, and just some of the impact that some of the patients and people have had on her medical career.
Yeah, she, I love talking to Tamara because you can tell she just loves still practicing and taking care of her patients. She's doing top-notch internal medicine care, and is really aware how hearing loss can affect patients. And she's a great colleague. And any patient I get from her is really well cared for and very happy with her care. It's a great interview to see what somebody who's practicing at the top of their game can do.
I feel like internal medicine is a tough field because you literally have to know everything about everything, it seems.
I think that's reasonable, or know enough about it to know who to send somebody to.
Exactly.
And so, you need to know, it's true. You need to know a lot about everything and know what you're good at and what you aren't. And I think that's really, and that's an art for everybody in life, but that is a particular art in that field. I'd agree.
Yeah. The next one is Dr. Richard Bailey, how his own hearing loss has impacted his life and career. And he's an ENT specialist who practices in Northwest Arizona and got his degree from Emory, and also did a residency, I'm jealous of him, in Hawaii, of all places. And with Dr. Bailey, a couple things that stuck out were how growing up around his father's practice influenced him, some of the patient stories he talks about, and he describes his own hearing loss and the treatment he received.
Well, you're going to be jealous of me because Dr. Bailey and I did residency at the same place. And so he was graduating when I was starting. And so, he's a great ear, nose, and throat doctor. But it was, to me, I knew all those things. What really came out was him sharing about his hearing loss and how he came to terms with it and treated it. And it was, it's not usual that you have somebody in this space describe their own experience with this problem. It's a great perspective. He's a great guy and he takes great care of patients. It was a really fun and interesting interview.
Yeah, I think in general, Dr. Syms, with the podcast, it's important not just for medical practitioners to listen to, but also for patients, prospective patients, any age, because whatever age you are, you're going to have aging parents, or right, you yourself are aging, or you have an aging spouse. And so it kind of runs the gamut of why someone should listen to these episodes.
Yeah. Hearing loss is everywhere. You're absolutely right. Yeah. So it's not just if you have it, it's for you to appreciate what it's like for other people to have it, or why it matters that they treat it or you treat it. Agreed 1,000%. So
the next is Dr. Randall Porter, acoustic neuroma surgeries, and is a top neurosurgeon at Barrow Brain and Spine. A couple things with this episode in particular is, how he made his way into the Barrow Neurological Institute, why he decided to pursue one of the hardest surgeries in all of neurosurgery, and he describes a particular surgery that he performed and some of the challenges involved.
Yeah, so this is a great personal interview with Randall. Him and I work together on acoustic neuromas. He's a great friend and colleague. Him and I have been doing acoustic neuromas together for, it'll be 20 years almost. It is 20 years. And it's a great interview to see how compassionate he is about his patients and how deeply he cares. And I know that to be true because we share patients in common.
Describe it a little bit, when he says, you talked about why it's one of the hardest surgeries. Talk about a little bit of what's involved.
Well, it has to do with the anatomy. In other words, so getting to it through the ear bone is relatively complex. Some of the structures, sometimes you're trying to preserve the hearing function, but get to it. You're trying to pervert the nerve that moves the muscles of your face goes through there. And then it's oftentimes juxtaposed or pushing into the brain. So you have to separate the tumor from the brain. So there's a lot of different variables in terms of it. So getting to the tumor is technically challenging, and then removing the tumor is technically challenging. And so that's really what makes it. And there's a lot of different functions that come out of the brainstem part of the brain where there's essential functions like, breathing and those types of things. So swallowing, breathing, speaking, seeing, all of those things.
Dr. Syms, thank God someone out there wants to do these surgeries because
it's great stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Dr. Mark Stasser, crazy and memorable medical moments, and also ear, nose, and throat specialists. Grew up in Prescott, Arizona, attended University of Arizona. And a couple things with this interview was, kind of his early medical experience. He talks about his childhood memories of growing up there and some of the favorite aspects of his job, and even talking about his ENT role models as he kind of went through his trajectory of his career.
Yeah, Mark's a great colleague, takes great care of his patients. You can sense his passion, but there's also a lighter, funner side of him. He tells a story where they took all the for sale signs from all of the houses around Prescott and put them on the high school property. And then unfortunately, he had a car that was very obvious that he had it. So basically, shortly thereafter, the police came to his house because they figured out that he was involved in it. And he tells that story. It's a great story that he shares about, kind of basically teenage hijinks. But it shows the real human fun side of him. And it's a great interview.
Nice.
And I never knew that. Right. And so one of the great things about this interview, him and I have met each other many, many times, but the podcast format gave the ability for us to really explore that, which is not, frankly, something that would come up in any other format of conversation.
As long as it doesn't incriminate him, he's already been found out.
I think he's already been incriminated.
Exactly. The next one, Dr. Boaz Ben David, the overlap between age, cognition, and hearing, associate professor of psychology at Reichman University. And, with this one, mechanism of hearing loss, how they lead to cognitive impairment, difficult listening environments, and their effect on the cognitive load, and color, vision, and why it deteriorates with age as well. You explored in this interview.
Yeah, he's a great researcher doing really interesting work in the area of cognition and hearing loss. And he goes over different aspects of his work and different scenarios, what they're finding out. And so he's one of those people on the front line doing that very methodical investigation for us to figure out why it occurs and what we can do about it. And it was a really fun interview. He's another one of these people, you can just sense his passion and how much he loves and how interesting it is because he's very excited talking about these topics. I really enjoy talking to him. He's a guy that certainly will circle around and talk to in a couple of years and see what he's gotten done, if not sooner, if there's something that's really moving.
The next one, Dr. Hannah Glick, socialization and cognitive function in hearing loss, also a cognitive neuroscientist. And with Dr. Glick, she talked about her triple PhD.
Yes.
People have a hard enough time getting one, so she gets triple PhD. That's remarkable. The relation between socialization, cognitive decline, and hearing loss. And she talked about neuroplasticity in adults after receiving hearing aids.
Yeah, she's another, similar to the prior guest, Dr. Glick's another person who's doing that kind of incremental research and figuring out what conditions and what factors affect your cognition. with hearing loss. And she's a real up and coming, brand new professor who, keep an eye on her because I think she's going to do great work in this field, which is great that she's pushing the world forward. It's great work she's doing.
So when I say kind of the neuroplasticity in adults after receiving hearing aids.
Yeah, so it shows that the brain can adapt and regain function and to getting that information. So you're not getting the information, those functions are not being used. You get the information with the hearing treatment, and those functions resume. So it's pretty important, right? Because if you lose the function, then what's the point of treating the hearing loss if your brain can't do anything with it? So once you regain that information, the brain is able to handle it, which is really important.
Remarkable. Dr. Catherine Sternasty, the barriers to entry for hearing aids. She's a research audiologist, and some of the things with this one in particular is the internal external stigmas that keep people from getting hearing aids, right? And you probably deal with this with patients of maybe they're pushing back on certain things, the control and how it affects people's perception in general. And she talks about the healthcare role in these perceived price points of hearing aids too.
Yeah, it's again another person who's doing great work early in her career. She's early in her career, and I think another person to follow who's looking at why do people get their hearing loss treated? Why don't they? Price points, all of these things. She's done some great work, and it was a really great episode exploring these topics. She's very facile and well versed in it. Why do people,
you probably present these different solutions to people based on your medical advice. Why do people push back?
I think if I can kind of flip the question, the most common reason people give is price, which I don't think is usually the reason. I mean, people don't know what they're not hearing, and they don't know how well it will work. So once you know the value of the treatment, most people do not balk at price. I think there's social stigma. The other thing is interestingly, people don't perceive their own hearing loss. In other words, you don't know what you don't hear. And your brain has an incredible ability to make up for that hearing loss. So you continue to communicate effectively despite your hearing loss. And I think that's one of the reasons why you see spouses where somebody has hearing loss, the spouse says you have a hearing loss, and the one that has the hearing loss denies it because they don't perceive it like the other person does. And that I think is a big portion of it.
Yeah. You have to listen to the people around you. And if there's multiple people telling you, then it's
probably true.
Yeah, you can't perceive your, like you said.
You don't know what you don't hear.
Exactly. The next one, Dr. Jasongulster, Research and Advancements in Hearing Technology. He's a recognized leader in hearing loss and cochlear implants and serves as the director of clinical research at Advanced Bionics. A couple things with this one, setting the standards for audiology and cochlear implants, the upcoming developments, audiologic versus subjective satisfaction, and will there be cochlear implants without external ports?
Yeah, so the thing that was great about this discussion with Jason, it wasn't about the technology company he works for. It was about, much broader, bigger topics. And that was really awesome. And so, he's well-versed in the field of audiology and the various topics and the things that, like creating a standardization of audiology and stuff. And he's a really sharp guy doing great work and leading in the field, pushing others to do better as well. It's a great interview.
So I want to encourage everyone to check out azhere.com/blog to see all of the podcasts. You're seeing, if you're watching the video, you're seeing where we're at, or just subscribe on your favorite podcast channel, whether it's Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, and go to ListenUp. The last thing I want to talk about, Dr. Syms, is, it seems like for some of these guests, they have a personal reason for getting into this field. And so I know there's another episode where you talk about your personal reason for getting in the field. And you mentioned at the top of the interview, but for people who don't know, talk a little bit about why you got into this field.
Yeah. So I have my brother who was 5 or 6 years my senior when he was an early teenager, was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And he underwent whole brain radiation for that tumor. And, so he had a rough teenage years, but it was, one of the things that was very insidious was he had a progressive hearing loss. And, he went and got hearing aids, but frankly, in hindsight, I realized how poorly his hearing loss was treated anyway. And it was profound. I mean, it's not with personal reservation. Him and I were estranged when he died, and that makes me sad. I do only in hindsight realize that it was his hearing loss that led to that estrangement, and that his hearing loss wasn't well treated. So I don't necessarily have the opportunity to fix that with my brother, but I do have that opportunity to help other people not suffer the same. And that is why I am so passionate about this topic, and why I tell people, don't get hearing aids, get your hearing loss well treated. And there's a huge difference.
Yeah. First of all, thank you. And I want to encourage everyone to check out azhere.com and the blog and the podcast. And thanks everyone for listening. And thanks, Dr. Syms, for having me.
Thanks. This was great. I appreciate it, Jeremy.
Thanks for tuning in to the Listen Up podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get updates on future episodes.